So maybe to explain a bit better, maybe the context. So who am I? So my name is Henry. I'm creative director and one of the partners at Dogstudio. We're a company based in Belgium with offices in Brussels, Namur, and lately Chicago. As you can see, we also work in different countries, which gave us quite an extensive experience with different cultures and adapting to different needs. Wait, maybe before starting this. So this is the latest show reel from the company. Some work is missing, but you're going to get maybe, if you don't know us yet, what we're doing. If it starts. Okay. Thank you. There's this question that we often have at Dogstudio, which is kind of central for us, like what if function and emotion are the baby? It's as quirky as we are in the way we say it, but the point is there. We have the feeling that there is something really important into connecting with your audience. Whatever you're doing, we're still connecting with human beings. And it's been proved that emotion really influences your decision-taking process. If we take a super simple example, everybody knows Slack. Slack kind of stormed out in the business messaging industry a few years ago, and there were companies like HipChat, which have been there for way longer, but didn't, kind of get the same vibe. Why? Because Slack was cool, was hip. People like to be on it. They like to brag, like, oh, you should come on that Slack. So they managed to create something which was more than just a messaging platform. And this is basically I would say, like the kind of the process. You create a great experience, you connect to people, you get a response, and then you get product adoption, which is better. Second thing is having personality. It's actually important to have like your tone of voice and have something which defines you and make sure that you're different from the others. There's this guy, I don't know if you heard about him, called Carson. He used to work, I think, like 20 years for this magazine called Reagan. He was doing art direction. As you can see, his work, it's pretty well known for what it is. It was, like in the 90s a lot of typographic work, pretty messy, a lot of information, everything mixing. But he kind of had this style which became pretty soon recognizable and people wanted it. So indeed, it's not, for a usability point of view, it's not the best, but he was communicating something different. And so he has a TED Talk, which is pretty cool that you can check out online, where he speaks about this kind of process, and he gets this example of those two garage doors that he saw at an airport, which basically have the same words, the same messages, but they don't deliver the same, like the same sublime message. And this is the point. He asked, which is the psycho killer here? And this is exactly this. Like, if you go further, and he explained this still in the same conference, sometimes before even getting to the message and getting to read the content that you have in front of you, you're already giving an information, you're giving a feeling, you're giving something that people can interpret. And your brain is working way faster than for emotion and for images that you're going to get than for the actual message that you're going to read. And so this is the point. Maybe there's like a real interest into tapping into people's emotion by trying to get faster to the brain. I wanted to go back a bit in time and explain how we got there and where we are right now in web design. Everybody remembers a few years ago, everything was kind of looking like the same. For those who don't know what I'm speaking about, is this. Like we try to emulate like a paper and a wood and glass, whatever, to have different textures so people can relate to the actual media they're trying to emulate on digital devices, which in a way is fucking bullshit, because if you want a real book, then you pick a book. And so there was this need and this thinking that people need to actually have the same kind of graphics to be able to feel the thing. At the same time, it was interesting because you could directly identify what you were looking at. But once again, on the usability point of view, it wasn't the best. Then if we go back on user side, and I know there's some people from Microsoft here, in 2006, the Zune player was out. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was kind of the start of a new trend, which was, back then it was surprising that actually Microsoft was like the one leading. And I mean, like, things changed quite a bit lately, but so far in 2010, you had Metro UI, which came out, which was the new way they had to show their graphics and to, relying on vivid colors and flat areas and something much more simple, so like the opposite of skeuomorphism. And then turns out that like 4 years after, everybody is fucking doing the same. And it started to become a big issue because some companies like here, Norman Nielsen, who are big consultants in everything which is UX, as they pointed themselves, it became an issue because you don't know if you're actually dealing with a button or with a background or with something else. So flat design, when it was to its extreme, kind of became an issue because first, it wasn't super emotional, you were just at flat areas, but secondly, you didn't understand anything. If we have like different examples, you could look at those two. On the left, you have something which is way more emotional, which is way more interesting graphically, but maybe on the usability point of view is not as good. And on the other side, you have something which is super effective, like logo, like button, but like in a way it sucks too. Before moving forward, I'm just going to address this like stupid debate, like, oh, you're working on Sketch or Photoshop, and why does it matter? And to that, I would reply both. What is important is to use the best tool to do the corresponding work. And yeah, I like this picture. And I like the fact that the dog on the wall is kind of like flat and that the user is in volume. Like, anyway. So it's interesting because there's no big answer to that. Depending on your project, depending on your needs, you will need a different kind of software to use. It just depends on what you're trying to achieve. The only thing which is a bit sad sometimes is just to go in a tool and say, I'm going to do everything with this because, they said that I should do it. Here at the office, what we're trying to do in the process is just try to follow this. Indeed, when you're going to a discovery phase and try to a new project, we go a lot with Sketchbook because I guess it's the best just to take a pen and just write down your ideas, and Photoshop, and actually here in .sketch. Why? Because you don't know, depending on the kind of project, sometimes you need to do heavy retouching, a lot of illustration, you need to create kind of a mood, and while Sketch is awesome to create application and to improve your workflow and to go faster, at the same time, it's pretty restrictive when it comes to this so far. And so maybe the best, and depends on the project, it's to kind of mix them. Maybe sometimes it turns out after a discovery phase that you go to Sketch and you keep on working with it. And then you have all the assets preparation, which is mostly done on, it's those, but it could be anything else. There's something else which is pretty important, and I guess like everybody here can agree, good design takes time. And I guess everybody saw this once in their life. Some clients expect that if they ask you for something for tomorrow and they don't pay, they're going to get a great result. And as talented as you can be, you need to put the work in it because there's something which needs to evolve. I found back this illustration from that guy who's super unknown. We just scribbled on a sketchbook back then, and he put open source on his website. It's pretty funny because I think it works. It's this way that you kind of diverge first before converging and getting to something which is working, or at least working with the information that you have, because on the right end of this line, maybe you're going to have to diverge again to integrate new data that you're going to collect. So this is what we try to do in our process. This is a workshop we did in New York last year with a science magazine where we were working on branding and trying basically to do kind of a co-creation session and discuss with them and try to open all the doors we could. And same goes for when we work on wireframing, trying to assess what are the best options and why. Or when we get into the design, I was speaking about the discovery phase and the direction phase. This is an example where we have just colors from the client, the logo, and we try to find the right mood. So basically starting with an element, duplicating, working on it, duplicating again, and having this big board where you're going to try to find some cohesion and also to define your global art direction. This is another example for another project. And another. As you can see, like some things are pretty consistent already, and when you move to the next phase, I was telling that it's kind of a process, you keep on iterating. But I'm going to come back on it later, but the important part is that everything is worked at the same time. You didn't lose like 6 hours on the header and then say, okay, well, what the fuck am I doing now? And this is the actual motion design of the page. So this is for the Museum of Science and Industry of Chicago, where we did a full redesign, strategy, UX, and redesign with them to actually try to immerse people into the environment of the museum before even coming to the place. It gets me to the next point. I spoke about the importance of not staying stuck on Sketch, for example. Is to maybe think of the website as a canvas. And I guess it's the whole point here of this process or this kind of thinking. This guy, Bob Ross, I think in the 70s, 80s, was doing a lot of videos to teach people how to paint, like traditional painting. It's pretty well known because of, I guess, his funky hair too. It's the way it was working, the way like painters are working is easy to link to the process to design a website. As for my background, when I was doing my studies, I was studying graphic design, and actually I was having a major in 3D design, so I was not supposed to be one day on this stage to speak about web. Turns out, I mean, I got my first job in a web company doing flash banners, and then one thing led to the other. But on my free time, when I was still studying, I was doing a lot of illustration, because I really like to tell stories in this limited frame, and to have kind of a consistent colors and consistent environment. So this is something I missed at some point. I felt that maybe it could be induced in what we were doing. Those are some of my super early projects in my first company, where, as you can see, I was relying a lot on textures and blending modes and a lot of things, because I wanted already to create kind of a environment people can feel something before actually getting to the content, because constraints of the web were not the same as they are today. And so if you take an illustration process, you're going to easily see that there's kind of some phases, and it's the same. I would say that if you make a parallel, you have wireframing first, and then you would be blocking zones on your content as much as you can have your content from the start, because most clients are terrible at delivering it, and then polishing, and then you have your final result. And if you keep going, there's more things. You can zoom in and zoom out. You have to learn how to balance on composition. You can adopt different styles, and you have to get this overall overview. Now speaking about the tools, if we keep on going this way. You have the brushes, which are kind of amazing because it's something which is often overlooked. People think that brushes are something that you shouldn't use for web design, and actually it turns out that you can do amazing things, and it can help you in a lot of situations. One of them is creating a background and kind of mixing, I would say, a website with an illustration thing. Second one is blending colors. Like I have 2 colors here. And just using a regular brush with like a low opacity and just eyedropping on the 2 colors. If you paint over, you keep on eyedropping, you're going to kind of create this transition. And why is it interesting? Is because typically, if you have this kind of situation where this doesn't happen, but anyway, you miss some of your visual, and you're like, oh fuck, like the thing is badly framed, and I don't know what to do with it. Then you shouldn't just get onto the next image. Maybe you can fix that, and just using a brush, it's not overly complicated to just pick the colors and keep on pulling layers to refine your image and actually to fix what is missing. This is really super roughly done, but basically it's doing the job. The second thing is, and it's more Photoshop based, but using layer mask, blending options. I tend to keep backup folders because you never know what you're going to reuse in the future. Sometimes you want to erase something, I tend to keep it, and later on when I activate the layer again, sometimes I notice that it's way better like this. So it's really organic, and this is why it's interesting to just embrace this long process. And I like this thinking that there's no mistakes, just happy little accidents, because it happens all the time that something you didn't figure out from the start is going to happen at some point. Next thing, which is really important if you want to add this kind of layer in your work and not stay stuck in those flat buttons and just doing like random rectangles all day long, is to be able to understand how the word works. And this is maybe more of a background of illustration thing too, but typically understanding how light works. What's a specular light, what's diffuse light, how light is bouncing and reflecting on surfaces, and how the color is maybe bleeding on it. It's kind of a old school background of like teaching, but it's super interesting because it gives you a different perspective, a different angle to what you're doing. Same goes for understanding shadows. We often have to place products on a website, and there's like the bad way to do it, and there's better ways. Typically, if I take back so this was just a circle, and using brushes, you can create this kind of thing, which is giving you the feeling that this is kind of a 3D isometric plane. And if I get to an actual project, let's have this bag. If you just do this a Gaussian blur on this ellipse on the bottom, you're going to get this bad result. Now, if you try to do it differently, and you think differently because you know how light should behave in some kind of environments, you're going to use different filters, you're going to duplicate, play with opacity, and the more you add those layers, and the more your thing is going to stand. And then if you understand even better, you will know that if your object is further from the ground, the shadow is going to grow more blurry and and fade more. And this is something which is going to create kind of a world inside your page, even though like you just have whites and a few shadows. Next is something I call the Pinterest syndrome. We noticed like 2 years ago that we were doing a lot of mood boarding, checking on Pinterest and websites like this. And it's funny because you see the website in a way that you're never going to actually see in real life. So you see full pages without, like when you're on a website, you're browsing, so you see like block by block. And this kind of thinking got us also to notice that if you manage to make the image work in like zoomed out format, then most likely it's going to work once you're zoomed in. Because when you're scrolling, you can end up telling a story, and if your blocks are well thought from the start, then most likely everything is going to fit at some point. If we take this example, you can find back the consistency through the blue blocks on the top and on the bottom. You can find a flow and a rhythm through the text, which are going from one side to the other. And you find a kind of balance between the size of the shapes, the colors you use, and how they're positioned in the page. And all of those elements together are going to create something which makes sense, even though you don't consciously think about it. Once you're scrolling on the page, you don't have the feeling that at some point you have something weird which just happened. Then you have capacity to work maybe with fonts, something which is often overlooked. People think that if you don't have this cool client, you're not working for Nike, and you don't have this amazing product shot that you get from the clients, nothing can happen. Actually, it turns out that you can do a lot of stuff just by playing with font, because images is something, but at the same time, without just, the copywriting is super important too, but you're going to get an impression by just seeing how your fonts are laid down. If I take this example, basically we didn't have much, but just using the same font or like the same two fonts and trying to mix them and change the way they're laid down, you start to doing something which is graphical, something that you can use. And after you have all the quick tips, like having some bigger titles, playing with different font weights in the same block, or mixing different styles, having a serif font and a sans one, because it's going to bring some kind of contrast. And yeah, eventually, like the best case scenario is when you can work with images. So this is what you got from the MSI when they asked us if we could create a visual to put on the submarine page. This submarine is actually in the building, so it was a picture. This is a picture which was taken when they were moving it from one place of the museum to the other one. It's pretty impressive when you see it in real life. But basically, say, okay, can you do something immersive with that? And this is the only, only shot that we have. So first reaction would be that. It turns out that it's a cool challenge as well, because you have to maybe think about how to make something working. So yeah, first one is like the boring part. You have to color the picture, try to maybe work a bit on the colors. And then you start to add layers. You think, okay, where the light should be coming from. And I mean, this is not, of course, like 100% accurate, but you need to create a feeling. And as long as people believe that this thing can actually happen, or like your brain is like tricked into, okay, this makes sense. It's not just an image which was just cut out and put a background on the background. And so you had elements like bubbles and the light coming from the sky, maybe tweaking a bit the angle, having those lights reflecting on the top, and this kind of glare. So it's like a lot of small things which actually are imperfect, and this is the cool part about it. The more it's imperfect when you're doing kind of illustration, and the more it's lifelike, because like life is not perfect, and this is the cool thing about it. And then obviously at some point you can work with your UI, and you apply the same tricks about font weight and varying and the buttons and everything. So all of this comes together at some point. So if we take an example, I would say, for example, so we also co-organize, I mean, so we started a festival 6 years ago called the Kick Festival. We keep on basically organizing it, so now we have also like a dedicated team, so it's easier. But we keep on redoing the branding every single year, because we have this opportunity, first, we have fun on something, and secondly, to make a difference. Because each year there's a different theme. Last year was interferences, and so based on that, we try to come up with a key visual which is working, and with a proper website which is going to, of course, give the information, but also get people to like react, to feel something. And so this is kind of a super loose process of the poster from last year. And then you get into the next phase, which would be to, in this case, prototype the bubble. Actually, why a bubble? Because soap bubbles are light interferences, so we wanted to create this kind of physical process, but like everybody likes a bubble anyway. And then once again, you get everything together, but it's once again about having a consistent feeling. So it's not only about the design, it's about everything, how the animation feels, what you're going to choose. If you have a hover state, does it make sense? What is too much, what is not enough, depending on your audience. So there's this work every time to make sure that we create something which makes sense, but at the same time, which is, I mean, working for a lot of people, which is going to make them react. And it's funny because people mostly are not going to, which is maybe not the best thing, but like a lot of people are referring to the website as the purple website with a bubble and not the Kick Festival website. But in a way, it's already reaching a goal for us, because it makes sure that people remember about it, and they're going to speak about it later. And this is what we try to do in our projects. If I take another example, this is a process for this year, which was a bit more complicated, because the theme is invisible narratives, and it's pretty complicated to get into that, because you can think about a lot of stuff happening. And so once again, it's about trying to find the right mood. So I think on the top left is the first one, and then we kept on iterating until someone at some point just suggested to have a gorilla under the water, which was pretty random. But turns out it was the winning idea, and so we kept on working on that too. As you can see, we first went for this kind of a 80s Miami Vice feeling, and then actually moving on to something a bit more literal, like really showing water and really showing the process. And then, because details are super important, you can see those, yeah, the fishes and the light, and there's this guy fishing on the side, and the birds just cycling. But once again, it's about like having a mood, and so far we had kind of a tremendous feedback over the website. Actually, just got I think a site of the month like a few days ago, and all the reactions we had were not like like cool. It's more like this is great, and it's not more about the skills and how you do it. It's more about, I think, the fact that people like get on a website and they see a fucking gigantic gorilla. And this is directly picking into the emotions and directly picking into their interest. And so, of course, it's important to like to work with the right tools and to use I don't know, Sketch when it's relevant or Photoshop when it is, and to think about your usability. Or like we use a lot of data. It can be like user stories and personas and all the design thinking process that everybody knows and heard about for a while. But there's still this need at some point to go further than that and just not stop at the data, but try to tell something different. I'm just going to use this moment to do a super shameless promotion. We're hiring designers and looking for a senior front-end right now for the Belgian office, just in case. And if you're curious, you can read. We have like two articles on Medium, and one of them is explaining more of this process plus a few more things, and then like the usual. And that's it.